Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Monsters Inc. Iceberg. Monsters Inc. is one of my favorite movies ever, and I hope you enjoy watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it. Before I go any farther, I want to quickly thank Reddit user Crystal Conspiracy who created this iceberg a year or so ago. For anyone unfamiliar with the iceberg format, in short, I'll be going over topics that get more and more obscure and weird as we march forward. With that said, let's dive headfirst into this iceberg. You've been jealous of my looks since the 4th grade, pal. Starting off this level of the iceberg is this killer roast that Mike delivers early on in the movie.
You've been jealous of my good looks since the 4th grade, pal.
While Mike's looks are certainly something to revere, some people have trouble with this quote because Mike and Sully didn't actually meet until college. It's possible that at the time, the writers didn't consider the prequel influencing lines, so nowadays, it's best to just interpret this line figuratively. Boo is the witch from Brave. So for as long as there have been theories about Pixar, people have made the connection between Boo and the witch from Brave. There's a lot of supporting evidence for this theory, and you could check out the Pixar theory here if you want some more details. Doors can travel through time. This theory is basically an addition to the previous entry, as in the Pixar theory, it's speculated that doors can travel through space as well as time. There's not a ton of in-universe evidence for this, except for, the Pixar theory, but the secret giraffe monster. Throughout Monsters Inc., animators inserted a secret giraffe Easter egg into a few different shots. You could see it here, disappearing between the change in camera angle. YouTuber Adache did a hilarious video on this subject, and he actually speculates that this little pixel in the background of this shot is actually the giraffe in the flesh. Randall's secret lair. Randall's lair is a location in the movie hidden deep within Monsters Incorporated where Randall hatches his scheme and uses his scream extractor. If you've seen the movie, there isn't much explaining to be done about how important this place is to the plot of Monsters Inc. Code 2319 means white sock. This one's pretty simple. The 23rd letter in the alphabet is W and the 19th is S. WS. White sock. Randall needs glasses. In Monsters University, Randall is shown wearing glasses until Mike points out that they give away his invisibility, at which point he stops wearing them. We also know that contact lenses exist in the Monsters Inc. universe, but if Randall wore those, we would also see floating contact lenses, so perhaps at some point Randall got corrective eye surgery. Mike's banishment during Finding Nemo. In the end credits of Finding Nemo, Mike can be seen snorkeling across the screen. Does this mean that Mike was banished a second time? Or, since he was one of the first to get used to the fact that kids were harmless, could he just be on vacation? Scare Island is the first piece of Monsters Inc. media. Monsters Inc. Scream Team, released as Scare Island in Europe, did predate the Monsters Inc. movie in some territories. The Monsters Inc. movie officially premiered October 28, 2001 in Los Angeles, but it wasn't released theatrically until a few weeks later. Scare Island / Monsters Inc. Scream Team was released on October 30th, 2001, which, depending on how you look at it, could make it the first piece of publicly available Monsters Inc. media. 9/11 censorship. Monsters Inc. was in development during the 9/11 terrorist attacks in the United States. Out of respect and sensitivity to the tragic situation, the Monsters Inc. team edited the scene where the steakhouse is flooded with CDA officers. Ever thought this scene was a little strange? That's because originally the steakhouse was just supposed to explode. There's a great mock-up of what this would have looked like by YouTuber Other Files the final season. Check it out here.
Well, I don't think that date could have gone any worse.
Buddy Boyle. Inside the Laughing Floor attraction at Walt Disney World, you can find a monster named Buddy Boyle who performs a hypnosis act during the show. There's not much else besides this to know about him. VR simulations. VR simulations are shown throughout Monsters Inc. as a valuable training tool for scarers. It's kind of interesting to see these clips, which came out in 2001, because they're extremely accurate to what VR looks like today. Secret Pixar Monkey. So, I'm actually not entirely sure what this is about. I reached out to the creator of this iceberg, but I haven't heard back, so if any of you guys have any input, throw it in the comments and I'll let you know if I get an update. Marty Wazowski. Marty Wazowski is Mike Wazowski's nephew, who only appears in the Disney World Laughing Floor attraction. Interestingly, Marty Wazowski's was part of a gag in the attraction where guests could text in their own jokes, and Marty would read them off to the crowd. So the stuff that Marty would say wasn't a repeated script, but it would actually change every time people watched him. Cut Boo Bowling Scene. This entry is really hilarious. I'll go ahead and just play the clip.
It's okay.
This clip isn't so much a deleted scene as it is a joke made by the animators during production. It appears in a bonus disc from the 2002 DVD release. Harry Potter. During one of the trailers for Monsters, Inc., Mike and Sully are doing charades, and Sully is trying to act out the phrase Harry Potter, showing that somehow a version of Harry Potter is present in the monster world. Check out the full clip here. Superstar Limo Reskin. Superstar Limo was a ride at Disneyland California that debuted in 2001. Receiving lots of negative reception, it was closed down in just a year. But looking to reuse some assets, Disney repurposed an animatronic for Drew Carey and turned it into a CDA agent. Lawsuits. Following the release of Monsters, Inc. trailers, there were two big lawsuits regarding copyright infringement on Pixar's part, one of which was dismissed and the other settled out of court privately. The first suit was filed by children's songwriter Lori Madrid of Wyoming, who alleged that the ideas of Monsters, Inc. were based off her 1997 poem, There's a Boy in My Closet. Later, Stanley Mouse filed a suit alleging that Mike was based off this drawing from a movie he wrote called Excuse My Dust, which he had unsuccessfully tried to sell to Hollywood. As you might imagine, Disney maintained the position that their characters were completely original. Primordial Ooze. This entry refers to a strange power-up found in the Monsters, Inc. Scream Team game which increased the fright meter of Mike and Sully. It implies that there's some sort of drug or substance that increases how frightening monsters can be. The name is also strange, implying that it potentially predates the monsters themselves. Sid went to the monster world. In the Monsters, Inc. Laugh Factory comic, a red-haired kid wearing a black shirt, who is heavily implied to be Sid from Toy Story, uses the network of doors to travel to kids' rooms and steal their toys. He also helps break Randall out of prison, though he's eventually caught and returned back to the human world. DVD Menu Jump Scare. In the original DVD release of Monsters, Inc., there's actually a jump scare of Sully hidden within the bonus features. I'll play the clip here. It's kind of surprising to me that they put this in. This probably could have scared some little kid. Monsters must hurt themselves to survive. This entry refers to the recurring theme of monsters having to hurt themselves to make kids laugh. It's pretty strange, given that there's plenty of other ways to make kids laugh, and depressing that such a common career in the monster world requires such self-harm. Other scare companies. Before the release of Monsters University, it wasn't really clear whether or not Monsters, Inc. had a monopoly on the Scream industry. We didn't know if there were other potential power sources for different cities. However, there were concept art pieces made for different companies before Monsters, Inc. was released, and the director stated that the original ideas for these companies were that they would have different methods of traveling to the human world besides the doors. This was scrapped, and eventually in Monsters University, it was made clear that there are other Scream companies like Fear Co. and Scream Industries, and that they too use doors just like Monsters Incorporated. Power crisis. Why is there a power crisis in the monster world? This isn't very clear, though we learn from the beginning of the movie that children are becoming harder to scare, probably because of them watching horror movies and building up a jump scare tolerance. However, in the video game Monsters, Inc. Scream Arena, video games themselves are actually pointed to as the cause of the scream shortage, with them contributing to kids not being scared anymore. Adult laughter is nuclear. So, in the movies, adults are never made victims of scaring because they would be believed by others and would potentially fight back against the scarers. This is a shame for the monster world because the energy provided from adults screaming is much greater than that of children. In Monsters University, the amount of screams from just a few adults is enough to power a doorway back into the monster world. So, how much energy would adult laughter provide? I believe that it would be too much to handle in any capacity, which is why the monsters don't attempt to retrieve it. If you think about it, the monsters could probably send spies into the human world to find adults whom monsters could make laugh, such as people who use hallucinogenic drugs or who have disorders which produce hallucinations, because no one would believe them if they shared their experience. So with the great amount of energy this would provide, why don't monsters make the effort to do this? Probably because adult laughter is so incredibly powerful that it can't be harnessed in any container the monsters have so far, and would be extremely dangerous to possess. Vanitas Execution. Mike and Sully make an appearance in Kingdom Hearts 3 when the villain Vanitas enters their world. After listening to him monologue for a bit and then start to attack the main characters, Sully throws Vanitas through multiple doors and shreds the last one, which is a super crazy form of banishment we've never seen before. Here's a bit of the clip.
Boo!
Codes 9117, 6501, and 6502. I'll go ahead and combine these entries because they're so similar. Just like 2319, the code for white sock, these are codes for child contamination related incidents. 9117 is code for marble stuck between toes, and 6501 and 02 are codes for dog or cat encounters. These are explained in the DVD extra features. Monster species names. It's pretty clear that the monster society is made from different types of monsters coexisting. It's not sure whether or not they're all different species in the sense that they couldn't cross-reproduce, or if they're different breeds like dogs, but the actual names of these species or breeds is never really made clear, although there are some nicknames for some types of monsters such as the fire breathers. Scream canisters are still used after Monsters, Inc. After the events of Monsters, Inc., despite the fact that Scream energy is no longer being used, Monsters Incorporated still uses Scream canisters. Honestly, this is probably because the monster world hasn't had enough time to innovate a new laughter container, and it would be expensive to replace all the existing equipment and infrastructure made for the Scream canisters. The media we have that takes place after Monsters, Inc. is never too far into the future, which is probably why these canisters are sticking around. Ponkiki's 21. Ponkiki's 21 is a Japanese TV show that ran from 2001 to 2005. Mike and Sully made a pretty hilarious guest appearance on the show. You can check out the full clip here.
Bye-bye!
Sully's tentacles. During a very early point in development, Sully was drawn up with tentacles, though these were quickly scrapped. According to the Monsters, Inc. wiki, these were scrapped because they were too distracting. Mike had no arms. In an early test of Monsters, Inc., Mike originally had no arms. This clip of him is pretty hilarious, and while I like this original design, I can see why it would have to be changed to make it easier for Mike to do certain things. You can watch the full clip here.
Just because I can't wear a tie, you think I would understand? Is that it?
No, not at all. Here. Is this a tie you wanted?
That's the one. That's the babe magnet.
It's kind of, big.
Proportions, Johnson. Proportions. It's attitude that makes the monster. Come on, let's go.
Mike was a late addition. Again, I apologize, I wasn't able to find anything out about this entry, though I'll update you if anything arises. Kids cause blindness. Under the Monsters File section of the DVD extras, it's mentioned that exposure to kids is radioactive and causes blindness. It's weird that they have to specify blindness, because I feel like that saying something is radioactive should be enough to scare people away, but they added in that extra little detail. Who developed the Scream Extractor? In the Essential Guide to Monsters, Inc., it's made clear that Randall forced Fungus to make the Scream Extractor. The reason this is so deep down in the iceberg is that many sources misattribute the project to have been a joint effort between Randall and Fungus, when in reality, Randall forced him to do all of the work. Why Sully is not in Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor. This is the last entry on this iceberg that I don't have an answer to. Monsters University football team. We get our first glimpse at football in the Monsters world during this scene from Monsters University. Or do we? This isn't actually the first mention of football in the Monsters universe. Check out this trailer for the first movie, which originally canonized the sport of football in the Monsters universe. Randall's Reformation. So, we don't get a lot of info on Randall's jail time or Reformation in general, but he shows up in the computer game Monsters Inc. Scream Team training, which takes place after the original movie. This means that he was likely released from prison at some point, but it would imply that he got a very short prison sentence. Or does this mean Randall got let off? Did he make an insanity plea and leave a rehabilitation facility soon after he was admitted? Or did he manage to convince a jury that he was innocent? That last possibility brings up the idea that there were some monsters who supported Randall's actions because, in a way, they were for the greater good of the monster world, at least from a certain perspective. You can collect other emotions in canisters. It's theorized that there are actual examples of other emotions being collected in Scream canisters besides just fear and laughter. During the scene from Kingdom Hearts 3 that takes place in Monsters Incorporated, Vanitas mentions how containers have fear and sadness inside. Furthermore, in the Monsters Inc. Scream Team game, there are multiple colors of canisters in this section. Could these be different emotions being stored? Monsters in Scaradise. Monsters in Scaradise was a sequel draft written by Circle 7, and it's honestly quite sad. The plot follows Mike and Sully going to find Boo, but they only manage to find an old lady in her bed, who actually turns out to be Boo, aged 70 years or so. Then, after seeing Sully and uttering the word kitty for the last time, she literally dies. That is insanely dark for Monsters, Inc. I don't know what these people were thinking when they created this. Boo's old design. Alright, this entry really isn't that big of a surprise. Here's a picture of what Boo looked like at some point during development. Fire breather discrimination.
Ah, nuts.
As you probably know, there are some fire-breathing monsters in the Monsters universe. But did you know that they actually get discriminated against quite a bit? Here's an example from Monsters University of a roommate ad that specifically disqualifies any fire breathers. Here's an example showing that fire breathers can't breathe in bathrooms. Personally, I think of that being more of a no smoking type of thing, where it's a safety hazard, sure, but it's unfortunate because those monsters, they can't help it to a certain extent. We know this fire breather accidentally sneezes fire, so if they can't help it, why is it banned? Mary is Boo's real name. Mary is in fact Boo's real name. We can partially make it out written on this drawing here, and also the voice actor of Boo is named Mary Gibbs. Sully was originally intended to die of old age. In an older concept of Monsters, Inc., Sully was actually written to die off of old age. It's a pretty good thing this was taken out at the end, because this is pretty dark. You can learn more about it here. Hidden City. Concluding this iceberg, we have Hidden City. Hidden City was the working title for Monsters, Inc. for a time during development, and it's also allegedly the name of a cafe where the original Pixar crew came up with a few of their movies. Alright everyone, thanks for watching this iceberg video. This was a blast to make, and I'm very glad you all got to see this. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel to catch more iceberg content, and comment what you would like to see next. Have a great night, y'all.